Hello, everyone. I am Grant Faulkner of NaNoWriMo. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for writing with us. Thanks for revising with us. We started, this is webcast number 4 of the revision webcast series that we've put on this year. And but you can still access the first 3. So you can still do the whole workshop if you'd like. And Catherine's going to put the link in to access like all the webcasts. And it's been such a treat, I got to say. I've learned so much during this time. And the opening metaphor that I believe Jessica used was taking this big high-level view of your novel up in the airplane, looking down on it. And now we're really going through the roadways of your novel today. We're going to go through the line edit, which is super fun. I love tinkering around with sentences. And I was thinking before this webcast how the best way to write a novel, I think, is to actually write a novel. The best way to learn to write a novel, rather, is actually write one. And I think the best way to learn how to revise a novel is also to revise a novel, except that it helps with each if you have a strategy and the tools to do it. And that's what I think this webcast series has done. It's given people the strategy and the framework to enter in and do that revision with a little bit of knowledge and guidance. And then you can learn even more the more you revise. And one of the metaphors that I really like for revision, it comes from the author George Saunders. He said it's like being in the optometrist chair where they're like, does it look better with this lens or this lens, this lens or this lens? And so if you don't have anyone guiding that process, you're just picking a lot of random lenses and wasting a lot of time. And I think Jessica and Christina have helped us like really figure out what lenses to look through to make our sentences and our story better. So I want to thank them. And also, I don't even know if I need to introduce them, but I'll introduce them a little bit. They've been so great. And I think that I was thinking also, per the plane metaphor, you guys have been everywhere with revision, and you've been there as writers and editors and teachers. You've developed, obviously, a lot of curriculum around this, both for this web workshop series and for Writing Mastery Academy and Fictionary, and you have like software. So you've covered the ground. And so it's been a real treat to have you with us and a real treat for our NaNoWriMo writers. And before we launch into the webcast today, I would love it, though, if you can tell everyone a little bit more about your products and services. And then also you're offering a discount on everything, and also offering a revenue share for NaNoWriMo, which helps us out tremendously so that we can do a series like this. So thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, of course. Christina, do you want to talk a little bit about Fictionary before we start?
Sure. So I'm Christina Stanley. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm Christina Stanley. I am CEO and creator of Fictionary. And I created Fictionary because I'm a writer myself. I'm an editor, and I just found that revising a novel was extremely, extremely difficult. And when I was in that part of my career, Jessica didn't exist yet either with her Writing Mastery Academy. So I didn't have that either. But now we have this awesome set of courses from Jessica. And Fictionary is software that will basically take you through the whole process of what Jessica is teaching. You can do all of that within Fictionary. And our what we're most proud of course, is the story arc. And so we start at a story level revision. We move on to the scene by scene revision. And Jessica's going to talk about the page level revision today. And so our two products work just superbly together. And thank you to Grant, of course, for having us here. It's a real thrill to be here with you and also with all of the NaNoWriMo writers. I did a novel in NaNoWriMo too. And so what we've done for this is that we've got 50% off your first 3 months of Fictionary. So that's Nano50 is the code, means it's only $10 a month, or $70 off an annual subscription, and that's Nano35. So that means it's only $130 for the full year, and you should be able to do all your revisions within that time. So hopefully you give us a try. It's a 2-week free trial, no credit card required. So come in and have a look and see how it works for you.
Thank you. And I'm Jessica Brody. I'm the author of many novels, and also Save the Cat Writes a Novel, which is a novel plotting guide. And I'm the founder of the Writing Mastery Academy, which is, we like to call ourselves the Netflix of writing courses. You get all access to all of our courses, all of our webinars, and our community for $15 a month, or if you're Nano, if you're here, we're offering the same 50% off our first 3 months, your first 3 months. So with Nano 50, or you can get $30 off an annual for $130 for the first year. And if you want to check out any of our courses, we do also have a free preview that gives you access to the first few lectures of every course. So you can just see if you think it'll help you and what we're all about. So hope you'll check that out. Thank you, Grant.
Thank you. Those are really generous discounts on fantastic products and services and software. Yeah, I love your courses, and I love Fictionary, and I love how much I've learned about both throughout this workshop series, and so I know there's more to come. And I just want to remind everyone who's a viewer that you please ask your questions and put them in chat, and they will be relayed to us. And in the latter part of this webcast, we'll try to answer every single question. And Jessica and Christina have been so good about this. Sometimes they stay late to answer every question and follow up in our NaNoWriMo forums. So please ask questions. We want to ask every revision question you have. And I can't wait to get on those highways and byways of sentences and start drilling down. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
All right. Thank you. Okay, yes. So we're here for part 4, the page level revision. In other words, Grant's favorite part of the process, apparently. I wish it was my favorite part. It's actually not. I actually like the scene level revision, but I'll bear with you all and tell you about the page level revision as well. Okay, so in case you missed the last workshops, be sure to watch those replays on YouTube. The links are in the description. We go through a lot of foundation work in parts 1, 2, and 3 that are very important that you do those first before you implement any of the strategies we talk about today. And part 1 of the workshop will explain exactly why you should do those first instead of, jumping right into a page level revision. As always, we have our free writing mastery revision Kickstart guide that you can download if you want to get like a head start on your revision and have all of that documentation in one place. You can go to writingmastery.com/now-what, and you can download that revision guide. Okay, so that's what we've done. By today, you should have, and if you don't have, by the time you implement the strategies of today, you should have completed a story level revision. You should have completed a scene level revision, which basically means you've locked your story structure into place. Your scenes are in the right order. You're not moving any big pieces around anymore. Everything's kind of set into place. And you've revised each scene one by one to make sure it is a really strong link in the chain that makes up your story. So our recommendation is that you do not do a page level revision, the things that we're going to talk about today, those detailed edits or that nitty gritty line edit. We recommend you don't do that until you've done these other things, just so you're not doing extra work. Because when you start moving things around, all of that page level work gets undone. And so if you have everything locked into place first, you'll just have a better page level revision and it'll go a lot smoother. And Christina is going to show us what she's been working on in Fictionary.
Okay, so I've got a couple of things to share here. All right, so let's start here. I just want to remind everybody a little bit about what Fictionary is. So right now here we're in on the guide page, and I'm going to re-import a manuscript just to show you how that's done as a quick reminder for anyone who is still at the story level or scene level revision. So here all I'm doing is I'm selecting my manuscript. And I'm happy with the name, so I'm just going to leave that. Now here it's very important when you're formatting your book for eventual publication, you're going to have it start with the word chapter for every chapter anyway. So if you do it now, it imports beautifully into Fictionary. We have other options, but that's my favorite. If you have multiple scenes within a chapter, we'll organize that for you too. And I use a scene break character of a tilde. You can use 3 stars, whatever it is. And then you just click continue import. And what's happening now is Fictionary is actually analyzing your manuscript. And it's organizing your scenes into, or your manuscript into chapters and scenes. It's pulling out all of the characters and it's listing them as a cast of characters and linking them to scenes. It's drawing the story arc. It's drawing your word count per scene. And the first thing you see when you come in is basically a look at what your manuscript looks like. So you can scroll down, you can have a look at the bottom scene. Is it all there? Everything looks good. Great. Just continue on. It's just a quick check. So my book has 54 chapters, 100 scenes, and 80,418 words. Smiley face for me. Yay. The next thing you'll see is your cast of characters, and you don't have to worry about this now. This is your first look at all of the characters in the book. They are, you'll update them as you go, and they're linked to your scenes. And then once you're done with this, you just go, I'm done for now, and you come back to the guide. And here we've got videos to show you how to visualize your manuscript, how to evaluate your scenes, how to export your manuscript. So this is really your main page. And now I'm just going to jump over to the manuscript that I used for this process. So first, let me say, I'm not quite ready to do a page level revision. So and you can see here, this is Pro Writing Aid. It's showing me I have some things to fix, but I'm not going to fix them now. And if you remember, the first thing that came was your story level revision. And we had you go through and name all of your scenes, which I've done here. So this is my opening image. You can see by the naming, I've actually used the Save the Cat course along with the full revision course in the Writing Mastery Academy to work on this manuscript. So I've got my setup scenes, I've got my catalyst, my debate scenes, etc. So I could see the whole thing together. And what I've done, so for example, when I was naming my scenes, like we asked you to do, is to put your key plot points in. So your inciting incident, if we look at my chapter 4, one of the things I did in my revision, it was way up early here and I didn't have enough setup time and didn't like it. So I've moved it way down here. You can see on the plot setting, I've set my story arc to yes, because this is actually my inciting incident. And then when I look at my story arc, I can see, so after I've done all my revisions, here's where I'm at. And I'm sort of happy with it. I still have another scene to write in here, which is going to push the plot point 1 out a bit. My climax is a bit late. I think I still need some more story level revisions at the end. Now, what I did was I did my full story level revisions, and then I did my scene by scene revisions, and this is where I ended up. And if you remember Jessica teaching, it's time now to go back to the story level and tighten this up and fix up my story arc. So you can see here, I've put things in my title, I've put write. So this is a blank scene. I haven't done anything. I know I need a scene here. I want to have lunch with Charlie. Really like Charlie, got to have lunch with him. So I have to write this. So this is a placeholder for me to get through my revision. So if we just back up to the opening image, I've gone through and I've done all my character story elements. And I know who my point of view characters are. I know what their goals are. I know my arc, internal goals, related plot, etc. through every scene. I went through and did all of my plot story elements, including naming the purpose of the scenes. And here I did something sneaky to follow Save the Cat, and I added the Save the Cat beats. So when I look at my purpose of scenes, I can see 25% of my story is fun and games, 21 is bad guys close in, 18 is the finale. And by doing it this way, I've got a full layout following the Save the Cat. So Jessica, I thought that was pretty cool that I did that.
And those percentages are like spot on. I think Fun and Games is 25% long.
Yes. And that was one of the things. So then I went and looked at the Save the Cat course and said, well, how did I do? And some was a little off, but not too bad. So again, when I finish my story level revision, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to make sure that my story arc looks right, that it's the right balance for everything. I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at my purpose of scenes. How does it do with Save the Cat? And then I'm going to do a quick check on the elements that I haven't left any out on the new scenes that I've written. Does it still flow? Does it all fit? And once that's done, only once that's done, am I going to come back. I'm not touching this 67-year. I am not going to do it until I finish, because I know if I start this, I'm going to go to the next scene and the next scene. And you can see, I mean, even my catalyst scene, there's issues here with passive and, a typo and another hyphenated issue and a space, like you can go on, right? So, and normally what I do at this phase is I would have the Pro Writing Aid extension or the Grammarly extension turned off. So I can't see this because it's too tempting to work on it. And then when I'm ready to copy edit, I'll turn it back on. And so Jessica now is going to go through all of the what you do at a page level. So the big hard work is for Jessica tonight.
Okay, well, thanks for that recap. That was helpful to see how the whole process gets done in Fictionary. And now we're here today to talk about the page level revision. She mentioned Grammarly and Pro Writing Aid, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But by the end of today, basically what we're going to do today is you'll have an understanding of why the page level revision is important. I'm going to give you 3 strategies for line editing. In other words, polishing your own work. So going page by page and line by line. We're going to give you some bonus tools that you can use to find and fix some page level issues that you might have. And most importantly, by the end of today, or by the time you implement the strategies of today, your finish line will be in sight. This is the last level of the revision process. So that's exciting. We've been doing this for a few months now, and it is very exciting. The page level revision is an important last step, but it is a last step, so that's good. So this is the last thing that's going to stand between you and your sparkly, twinkling, polished, finished draft that you can be really, really proud of. And I hope you are proud, because revision, as you can see, is a process. It is not a quick one. It is a process. It's a lot of work, but it is so worth the effort in the end. So a quick overview of the whole process again: story level, scene level, page level. We are zooming in now to the page level revision, the final revision level. So let's just recap what the page level revision is, so we are all on the same page. Haha. The publishing term for the page level revision is the line edit. You'll hear a lot of publishers and a lot of editors talk about doing a line edit, and that makes a lot of sense. You are literally going line by line through your manuscript and checking every sentence, every word, polishing it until it really shines. So I like to call it that zoomed in view, where you revise each page line by line, sometimes focusing on the sentence level, the paragraph level, sometimes even the word level. So we're going to be polishing sentences at this level. We're going to be choosing the right words, like analyzing our word choice, optimizing that word choice. This is the really nitty-gritty editing work. It's the most detailed work you're going to do throughout the whole process. And it's where we use what I call the finest paintbrush. So we've been painting in very broad strokes before this, and now we're getting really minute with our paintbrush and painting in those really fine details. And I know a lot of people really enjoy this part of the process, so it can be fun. The mindset around the page level revision is small changes to make big magic. And I think what I'm hoping I'm going to demonstrate today is that when you start getting into that nitty-gritty work and you start looking for those places to make tiny changes, they can actually have huge repercussions. So they can create really big magic just by changing a word, a sentence, deleting a sentence. So that's really what the page level is about, is finding those small changes that create big magic and make big differences. We are not doing big things here. We are doing small things, but we're creating big change. Okay, so as Grant said, we are now at the most zoomed in level. We started out at looking at our story from the International Space Station, where we could just see, continents and oceans and mountains, and we were moving things around from that very high level. Then we zoomed into the scene level, where we were looking at it from more of an airplane, so we could see a lot more zoomed in things, but we couldn't see the really fine details like the leaves on the trees or the cars on the road. And now we're on the road. We're driving the road. We're navigating the turns. We're looking at every leaf. We're really appreciating and analyzing the scenery. And that is what the page level revision is all about. Okay, so the 3 strategies we're going to focus on today: fixing repetitive sentence structure, optimizing word choice, and trimming unnecessary text. And I'm going to give you strategies for doing all 3 of these things so you can check your own work for these issues and line edit them right out. All right, so let's start with fixing repetitive sentence structure. So basically what this means, repetitive sentence structure, is when you have several sentences that are very close together on the page that either start in the same way, have a similar rhythm or cadence or structure, or have similar lengths. And I'm going to give you an example in a moment. So often this shows up, it can show up anywhere, but I find it most shows up when you're describing something, describing a setting, describing a character, or even describing an action that's taking place. That's when we tend to fall into the repetitive motion of sentence writing. Unfortunately, repetitive sentence structure is a problem because it can make your writing start to feel predictable on the sentence level. The reader starts to get into this kind of monotonous rhythm, and they just start to feel like every sentence is the same. They can predict how the next sentence will feel to them, and it just starts to get a little bit boring. So it can cause that, sort of slow dragginess of your pages. So a caveat is you can ignore repetitive sentence structure if it's done intentionally. There are obviously reasons why you might want to do repetitive sentence structure, stylistic reasons, voice reasons, to emphasize a certain something you want to emphasize. So anything that's done intentionally, you can just ignore this. But we want to look at those unintentional repetitions that might be dragging down our pages and making them just not as stellar as they can be. So let's look at an example. Here's just a made-up example I wrote. Joan Whittles was a petite woman with an angular face and large, unblinking eyes. She wore a pair of high-waisted slacks with a button-down shirt and a navy blue blazer. She looked a lot like a school principal. She might have been one. She sat across the desk from me looking nervous. So here's a character description of a character who's just walked into this room and sat down. As we can see, we have a lot of the same type of structure. It's subject, verb, subject, verb. Joan Whittles was, she wore, she looked, she might, she sat. So it's a lot of the sameness over and over. And as you probably could tell when we were reading it, it wasn't a very interesting paragraph. And that's why. So how do we fix repetitive sentence structure? Well, there's a couple things we can do. First, we want to try to vary our sentence starters. Just like we varied our scene starters, we also want to vary how we start our sentences so they don't feel repetitive. We also want to try to mix up long and short sentences. The sentences in the example I just gave were sort of relatively the same length. They had similar cadence. So we want to kind of keep those varied in terms of length. We also want to diversify elements. What that means is you want to be describing things, but you can also mix in reflection, exposition when you're explaining something to the reader, action, and even dialogue. All of those can help break up sentence structure so that you're not just describing something, you're not just describing the person or the action or the scene, but you're also mixing in other elements that keeps things interesting. So let's look at a way we could potentially revise this paragraph. So there's the paragraph again, I won't read it again, but this could be a potential revision to this paragraph. I'm going to read it and then we can break it down and see what I did. So a potential revision could be something like this. Joan Whittles was a petite woman with an angular face. Large, unblinking eyes stared back at me from across the desk, reminding me of being in the school principal's office, where I spent far too many hours for my own good. Maybe she was a school principal. She certainly dressed like one in those high-waisted slacks, button-down shirt, and navy blue blazer. Although my school principal never fidgeted like that. Was she nervous? Okay, so let's look at what I've done a little bit closer. I'm going to put this on the screen on its own. First up, I varied the sentence starters. Instead of she was, she did, she was, etc., I started with different things. So Joan Whittles was, that's the same, but now I have large, unblinking eyes stared back at me. Now I've got an object and a verb instead of a subject and a verb. Maybe she was a school principal. That is a little bit of a different sentence starter. Although my school principal never fidgeted like that. Again, another different kind of sentence starter. And was she nervous? So a lot of different small changes here that suddenly become a lot more of a diversified paragraph. The other thing I did is I started to mix up sentence lengths back to back. So we've got this long sentence right next to a very short sentence, and that also creates some diversity. I added some extra elements like this exposition. In the school's principal's office, where I spent far too many hours for my own good. That's just a little piece of backstory there that we're now learning about the character through this description of Joan Whittles. So it's not just about describing the character, it's also about giving the reader a little bit of information. I added some reflection as well. Maybe she was a school principal. Was she nervous? That is now the character reflecting on the description that she's giving. Oops. So those are just some ways that you can diversify and fix some repetitive sentence structure in your own writing. All right, let's move on to our second strategy, which is to optimize your word choice. So optimizing your word choice basically means making sure that you are using the best possible words to convey your meaning. So I like to pull this quote, you've probably heard it from before, from Mark Twain. And he said, "The difference between the almost right word and the right word is really a large matter. 'Tis the difference between the lightning bug and the lightning." So Mark Twain, very wise here. We want to make sure that we are always using the best words to convey what we want to convey to the reader. And every time you don't use the right word, you're sort of missing a golden opportunity to use a better word. So another way we optimize word choice is not only using the best words, but also removing what I call word clutter. So word clutter are excess words that don't really add any value to the sentence and might even get in the way of making that sentence more clear. So it might hinder clarity. So some common areas we want to focus on in order to achieve this word choice optimization is we want to replace overused words, we want to eliminate redundant words, and we can't see my screen here, and we want to use more specific words. So those are the three things we're going to talk about today. And if you do these three things, you will have taken a really, really big step toward optimizing your word choice on your pages. So let's take a look. So replacing overused words. Now, every author has sort of this list of overused words, things that they rely on a lot, things that they kind of go to. It's their go-to word list. Every author's is a little bit different. I'm going to share with you one of my overused word lists. They include things like glancing and shrugging and nodding and looking and flashing smiles and shaking heads, and among others. It's kind of fun when you create your own overused word list and then you compare it with other authors. It's a little game I like to play. But these are words I constantly go to and I'm constantly using, and it's constantly coming up in my line edits of like, can we have some variation? She's doing a lot of glancing, or their characters are doing a lot of shaking of their heads. But we use these in the moment when we're drafting or even when we're revising that big picture stuff, because we just need to get a word down. We don't really care if it's the optimized word. We just want to convey what we're trying to convey. Well, now's the time where we're going that line by line, word by word, and making sure we're not overusing words. So in order to change them, first we have to locate those words and try to vary them up. And I'm going to give you some tools in a minute on how you can do that. But honestly, when you find a word that you think might be an overused word, just do a quick find in your manuscript and it will reveal how many times you use that word. And you might be a little bit shocked. So as we're varying our words, we want to get creative. So try reframing the sentence instead of just replacing the word. You can always replace words, but I find that the best way to get rid of those overused words is actually to try to reframe the sentence, because it forces you to look at the sentence in a new way, as opposed to just replacing an overused word. So let's look at some examples. He smiled. Well, obviously I could start replacing smiled with some, synonyms like he beamed, he grinned, or I could rephrase the sentence and do something like there was a twinkle in his eye. So now every time I have the word he smiled, I might start varying some of those into a different frame or a different kind of sentence. And that just creates more diversity in your writing as well. Okay, so some tools for finding and replacing overused words that you might want to take a look at. First, replacing overused words. I like to use a site called onelook.com. Instead of it being a thesaurus, it's actually a related word search. So you put in the word smile and it gives you some synonyms, but it also gives you words that are related to smile. And that's how I actually found the word twinkle, because sometimes smiling is related to twinkling. And so I was able to create a new sentence based on a related word search. So I love onelook.com. It's my go-to. You can also always use thesaurus.com. It's also a common one. And if you haven't heard of The Emotion Thesaurus, a book by Angela Ackerman and Becca Puglisi, I think her name's pronounced, it's amazing. So anytime you're kind of overusing certain words for emotions, for describing emotions, the Emotion Thesaurus kind of helps you break out of your normal patterns and that kind of box that we put ourselves in of I always describe fear like this, or I always describe nervousness with these certain traits. This book will help you break out of that. So I highly recommend either checking that out from the library or getting yourself a copy. Also, it's just to note, this should go without saying, but it doesn't always. Make sure you are using words appropriate for your genre. If you're writing a middle grade novel and you're using thesaurus.com, you don't want to start putting in a bunch of heavy, big words that maybe your reader might not understand or be ready for. So some tools for finding overused words. There's a site called autocrit.com where you can put your paragraphs in there and it will start picking up your overused words. Also, as Christina mentioned, there's grammarly.com, which works right in Fictionary. So if you're already using Fictionary, you can turn that on when you're ready to do your page level revisions and it will start highlighting words that you use too much. Similarly is ProWritingAid.com. They also do a great job at helping you find those overused words that you're just relying on over and over. And so you can start working on getting them out of there. Okay, and lastly, with word choice, we're going to talk about eliminating redundant words. So redundant words are words that are taking up space in your manuscript that don't really add any value. These are those clutter words I mentioned before. So he shouted loudly is a great example. Is loudly really that necessary? Can you shout softly? Can you shout mysteriously? Not really. So shouted really does the work here, and you can eliminate loudly. So this is a great example of a redundant word. Adverbs are actually pretty often redundant, but we'll talk about adverbs in a minute. I scanned the room with my eyes. This one actually came from one of my own manuscripts. Can you scan the room without your eyes? I guess you could use maybe some sort of sci-fi device. If you're writing a sci-fi, and you could scan the room with a special, something scanner. But for the most part, we're going to assume that you mean your eyes. So we could probably just cut with my eyes. Another word clutter that's really not adding anything, and it's just sort of unnecessary. Please, I say silently in my mind. Well, first of all, the please is actually a thought because it's in italics, so we might not need any of the things that come afterwards, but silently means in my mind. So I might just get rid of the in my mind. I might get rid of the silently and just say, please, I say in my mind, or I could get rid of the whole thing and just leave it as is. We were surrounded on all sides, like this one, again, from my own manuscript. Can you be surrounded out? Not on all sides, it kind of means all sides. So you could cut that. You could cut on all sides. Suddenly he appeared without warning, taking me by surprise. This one has tons of redundancy in it because suddenly pretty much means without warning and usually means you're going to take someone by surprise. So I might cut without warning. I might cut the whole thing and just say suddenly he appeared, which is implied that it's by surprise. So those are just some examples of ways that we get redundant words. And again, it's all because we're just writing and we're just letting the words flow. We're not really paying that close of attention to our word choice. And this is the time when we do that. There is no fault in using redundant words. We all do it. And now we can take that time to really go word by word and make sure they are all adding something to your manuscript. Okay. Using more specific words. I actually do have one more thing about word choice. Using more specific words means getting specific with your word choice, and what that really can do wonders for your sentences. When you look at every word and ask, is that the best word? Is that the most specific word I can use? You can elevate just a regular sentence into a stellar sentence. So here's some examples. I got out of the car and crossed the road, nearly getting hit by an oncoming bicycle. Okay, this is a fine sentence. It's a normal sentence. It kind of goes by quickly and it doesn't really do anything special, but that's okay. But now if we wanted to elevate this, we could get really more specific with these words. We could say something like, I jumped out of the car and darted across the road, nearly getting trampled by an oncoming bicycle. Notice the words I replaced here are a lot more specific and they're giving you a more visual concept. Like instead of got out, I jumped out. Suddenly there's urgency in that word. I darted across the road. Again, hurrying is implied in that verb. And getting trampled by an oncoming bicycle, this might not be the word you choose, but I think it's a funnier word. So maybe there's just a little bit of humor that you're choosing to infuse with your word choice. Another thing that we kind of rely on a lot in earlier drafts is words called intensifiers. So the forest was very cold. Very is an intensifier. It intensifies the word cold. Does it really do anything to the word? Does it make you feel any differently about the forest? If I took out the word very and added it back in, would you suddenly go, oh yeah, it's a much better sentence now? Not really. And that happens with intensifiers. We kind of put them in because we want to quickly express that it's very cold, not just cold. But now when we're going word by word, we want to look at this and go, is this really the best way to convey the coldness of this forest just by adding the word very? Or could we do something more creative like the forest was an icy, bone-chilling cold? Suddenly, now that makes me cold. That feels specific, and it feels like it's creating a sensory response for me. And that's what we do with specific words. We create responses. One more example, the air smelled good. So again, a quick way to get down a thought that your character is having or that you're describing about the setting, but doesn't really do anything to evoke anything for the reader. So you might want to get more specific. What does the air smell like? Why is that a good smell? So something like the air smelled like it had just rained. Most people like that smell. So it kind of implies that it's a nice smell while being more specific. Okay, so when you're optimizing your own word choice, you want to review your manuscript looking out for overused words, redundant words, and words that are not really specific enough and therefore not evoking anything in your reader. This is where those small changes to word choice can make your sentences shine a lot brighter. And again, it feels like very monotonous work to go word by word, and it is, but you can see how those small changes are starting to create that big magic. Okay, and finally, let's talk about trimming unnecessary text. This is the third strategy that you can use to line edit your own work, is to look for that text that is not necessary and not adding anything to your manuscript. Much of the page level revision is actually not about adding or revising, but about deleting, especially when you're an overwriter like me. You tend to write a lot and not a lot needs to be in there. So my page level revisions will often consist of me deleting a lot of text that is not really helping anything. So when we put every paragraph sentence to the test, we can really determine whether or not that paragraph, sentence, or word deserves to be in your final draft. And if not, we can get rid of it so that the paragraph, sentence, and words that do deserve to be there can really stand out and shine. So unnecessary text, although it may seem a little harmless, especially when you're looking in word by word or sentence by sentence, what's one sentence going to do? Well, a lot of unnecessary sentences in a row can bloat your writing and cause it to feel heavy, dragging, and slow. So trimming that unnecessary text gives stellar sentences a chance to shine and stand out. When you surround those really great sentences with a lot of unnecessary bloating of writing, it can cause those sentences to get buried, and they're never fully appreciated the way that they should be. So I like to think of unnecessary text. This is my thing. I like to think of it as scaffolding. Scaffolding on the construction of your manuscript. When you're doing a first draft or even a second, third, or fourth draft, we build this scaffolding into our manuscript. Like think about when someone's constructing a building, you have this scaffolding on the side. It holds up the construction workers. It allows them to put their tools there, and it kind of holds up the building while it's being constructed. So we do the same thing with our manuscript. We build this scaffolding with this unnecessary text. It feels necessary when we're writing it because it's holding up the story in our brains. But actually, when we come back and take a step back, a lot of it is not necessary and can come down because the building, the manuscript, now stands on its own. So I'm going to give you some examples of common types of scaffolding that we all put into our manuscripts that don't really necessarily need to be there. And then we're going to focus on two of those and really drill in and see what that looks like. So telling is often a form of manuscript scaffolding instead of showing. When we're telling the reader, we're worried that they're not going to get it. So we're kind of putting that in as holding up the story. And then when we take a step back, we realize that we've actually done enough work and don't need that telling anymore. A lot of times scaffolding just comes in the form of over-explaining something. We want to make sure the reader really gets it, or we're explaining it to ourselves as we're writing. And then we take a step back and we go, okay, it's not really doing much to hold up the story. It can probably get deleted. Overuse of internal questions. This happens to me a lot, when the character is sort of asking a lot of questions in their head because you yourself are kind of working out what they're thinking. A lot of times those just come off as unnecessary. Spoiling your own narrative. I'm going to get to this one in a minute. It's my favorite one to talk about because I do it a lot. And overuse of adverbs. So we're going to talk about these last two types of scaffolding and how you can kind of identify them in your manuscript and polish them right out. So spoiling your own narrative. This happens when you tell the reader something you're about to show them. It happens all the time without you even realizing you've done it. When I show you an example from one of my own manuscripts, I think you'll see how easy it is to do without even realizing you've done it. So what happens when you do this is you basically are telling the reader and then showing them what you just told them you would show them. So all that creative showing work that you've worked so hard to do, and I want to show, not tell, it becomes obsolete because you've told them what you're about to show them. So we do it without realizing because as when we're writing, we're sort of gearing ourselves up for something we know is coming, but the reader doesn't know. And so we accidentally slip in these little things of telling the reader what's coming without realizing we've done it. And then we've spoiled our own writing and made all that good showing work not matter. So this is a super subtle, nitpicky thing to look for, but it is so worth the search. So let's take a look. This is actually from an earlier draft of Suns Will Rise, the third book in my System Divine trilogy. And it read like this: climbing onto a nearby bench, Alouette peered out at an abandoned alleyway. The window was at street level, which meant if they could somehow get it open, they could shimmy through, but there was no latch anywhere to be found. The window was just a solid piece of plastique embedded in the frame. She needed something to jimmy it up with, a tool of some kind. Alouette spun back, searching the room. Her gaze landed on a small screwdriver lying on Prouvair's workbench. Using the droid's footsteps from above to shield the sound, Alouette hopped down and hurried over to grab the tool. She immediately went to work trying to pop the window from its frame. Okay, so as you read that, maybe you noticed where I spoiled my own narrative. Here's where I did it. She needed something to jimmy it up with, a tool of some kind. I've basically set up what she's about to find. So instead of her just finding it, I've said, oh, this is what she needs, which creates two problems. One, I've just spoiled what she's found. And two, isn't it awfully convenient that she actually finds the thing that she needs right after she says she needs it? So there's two problems here. All I needed to do is cross out those two lines. And suddenly I've fixed the problem. No longer is it convenient that she's found the tool that she needs because she hasn't said she needs it. And I haven't spoiled what she's about to find. So again, small changes, and suddenly I've fixed a pretty big problem on the page. Okay, so that is spoiling your own narrative. I have more examples in my course if you want to take a look, but let's move on to the next type of scaffolding we're going to talk about, which is one I saved the best for last. Everyone loves to talk about adverbs. So let's talk about adverbs. Overusing adverbs is definitely a form of scaffolding. It's one of the most common types of scaffolding. Adverbs are so common in manuscript in earlier drafts because we feel like we need them. They feel so necessary when we put them in. Like, I have to put this adverb in or no one's going to understand how this action is being performed. And most of the time, they're really not that necessary in the end, because what you'll find is that your writing has done the work of the adverb, and you can usually take the adverb out or revise the writing so that it does do the work that the adverb is doing. So adverbs can enhance sentences, especially when you use them sparingly and very specifically, but oftentimes they're considered lazy writing, meaning how can you write a better sentence that doesn't require the adverb? And when you write that better sentence with the more specific word choice, you end up with usually a stronger sentence if it doesn't need an adverb. So let's take a look once again from my own work. This is from the second book in the System Divine trilogy, Between Burning Worlds. And it says, the inmates formed a line and began to walk lethargically into the tunnel. Beside them, the droids paced, their heavy metal footsteps clanking, the rayonets embedded in their arms glowing menacingly in the dim light. Okay, so there's two adverbs in one paragraph, which to me feels maybe a little bit much. Here they are, lethargically and menacingly. When I say that overuse of adverbs doesn't mean that you have to get rid of all the adverbs that you have. It just means you want to put each one to the test and really decide which ones deserve to stay and which ones can maybe be revised out. So let's look at the first one, lethargically. So actually, if I just replace the word walk to shuffle, I don't need the adverb anymore. Shuffle pretty much means lethargically. So I can say the inmates formed a line and began to shuffle into the tunnel. I've gotten the same imagery without the adverb. That's just a better verb. The second one, heavy metal footsteps clinking, the rayonets embedded in their arms glowing menacingly. So the heavy metal footsteps and the rayonets, which you know if you've read the book by now, that these are deadly weapons. That kind of does the work. It's menacing on its own. However, because we've cut the first one, we decided to keep the second one. And we decided that was a little bit more balanced. Now there's only one left in the book. So now it reads, the inmates formed a line and began to shuffle into the tunnel. Beside them, the droids paced, their heavy metal footsteps clinking, the rayonets embedded in their arms glowing menacingly in the dim light. So we did decide to keep that one, which you absolutely can, but balance is always key. Okay. So my last tip for you when you're thinking about unnecessary unnecessary text and whether or not it should go, is you can use this little strategy that I've come up with. It's called the Liftout Test. Basically, what it means is if you're unsure if something should be trimmed or if it's necessary or not, try lifting it out of your manuscript. Try just cutting it right out, maybe save it somewhere else so you still have it. Read the sentence, paragraph, or even the whole page back. Ask yourself, did something feel missing? Is the page clearer without it or more confusing? Is the text stronger without it? So the key here is to be honest with yourself. I think a lot of times you'll find when you are questioning something, when in doubt, cut it out. If you cut that part out and you read it back, I think you'll often find that it reads a lot stronger. Your intuition is typically right when it comes to unnecessary text. This is a great way to prove it to yourself. Remember, small changes equals big magic. Okay, so if you'd like to learn more about the page level revision, you can check out the complete novel revision course where I have all the other types of scaffolding I talked about and was breaking those down with examples. I have a lot more examples from my own manuscripts that are now published and went through this same page level revision. I also have a complete list of dialogue pitfalls, which we didn't have a chance to talk about today, but dialogue is another really big aspect of the page level revision and polishing that dialogue up. So there's a list of all the types of pitfalls that authors often will fall into when writing dialogue and how to fix them. I also have more strategies there for polishing those paragraphs and sentences, optimizing the word choice, and also fixing inconsistencies on your pages as well. The course also comes with a lot of on-screen demos. So this is where I take actual pages from manuscripts, and you can watch me revise them live as I'm doing it. I sort of explain how I'm revising, why I'm making the choices that I'm doing. And also, of course, it comes with the complete guides to the story level and scene level if you still haven't started those. Okay, so you can visit writingmastery.com/nowwhat to start learning and start taking that course for only $7.50 since we have this coupon for NaNoWriMo. Yeah, so Christina, do you want to talk a little bit more about Fictionary? I am done.
That was fantastic, Jessica. Thank you for doing that. I know this whole webinar was really on you because it's page level and it's super exciting. But so, I mean, all I want to say really about Fictionary here is, we're at fictionary.co/now-what, and you can find your coupons there and how to apply them when you start your free trial. If you remember back, we've got so many amazing things within the Fictionary software, like our story map, which shows you all the story elements in one place. And we've got the Fictionary story elements, which helps you on a character, plot, and setting structure to actually analyze every scene, and you can look at the high level view of the story arc or word count per scene, or how many characters are in each scene, or how many scenes each character is in the opposite way, and things like that. And I really do want to highlight that the reason Jessica and I are here together is that the Writing Mastery Academy has phenomenal courses on how to revise your novel. And it works directly in Fictionary. So we're giving you not only here's the knowledge you need, but also here's a tool to do it in. And our genuine hope is that you end up with a great story that you publish and we all get to read.
Thank you so much, Christina. Those are perfect words to end your
Yes.
presentation on. And yeah, that was so impressive. I loved also, Jessica, the way the lift up approach, or lift it out. I forgot what it was, but that is like so perfect because when you're revising, you come to so many decision points, right? It's just continually making a decision, and lifting like a simple word out and seeing what it reads like, the sentence without that word, can be so telling. And then the way you said to trust your intuition, also tough to do, to identify the intuition and trust it, and also be honest with yourself. I mean, those are they sound easy, right? But they're not. And that's why I love this workshop series, is that you've both given us, this great kind of game plan and strategy to identify those decision points, because in the end, it's up to the author, but it's good to know what you're deciding and why you're doing it. So thank you so much for that.
You know what, Grant, I just want to highlight what you just said. In the end, it's up to the author. And that's really, really, really true. The author's the artist, and we're providing information and structure, but it's still up to the author. And that's where the creative joy comes in of revising your story, because the author gets to make those decisions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, each one of those decisions is a creative moment, right? You're adding something or taking something away. That deleting part too. My God, that's the toughest thing. Yeah. And sometimes we think things can make the decision for us, but it is up to us in the end. So we have some questions. Linda Collins. Well, first of all, Linda Collins asked, when do the discounts expire? Or do they?
I don't know if they do. Do they?
We put them up there. The goal is this with the discounts is that we know that the writer goes through a process through the year. And so in November, you're writing your novel and you get it done, and then you're exhausted, and it's Christmas and it's New Year's, etc. And then along comes this whole process. And we know it's a long process. And some people might not have started yet or just starting now. And so we thought to help the NaNoWriMo community, we just leave the discounts out there. So when you're ready to revise your novel, then go ahead and use the coupons.
Yeah.
That's so nice of you. So they'll be available for at least the next 100 years.
At least. Yeah.
And I hope I'm still available in 100 years.
I think we will be. Yeah.
But do make sure that you're going through these Now What pages, because those are the links that will make sure NaNoWriMo is getting that 30%, which we want to continue to support NaNoWriMo. So even if you're doing it 100 years from now, hopefully those pages will still be up.
Yeah, I think so.
On you too, Grant, on you.
Yeah, and I don't think people should wait. I want to give them some urgency. I think you should redeem them now or soon. Don't, don't put off your revision, put it that way. Just like we don't want you to put off your novel.
No, and the reason is NaNoWriMo is coming up sooner than you think. It's going to be November, and you're going to be writing that next novel and really wishing you'd finished the previous one before you do that.
That's good advice. That novel queue can get kind of long. So
yes, it can. And you want to go, Nano, get it revised, get it published, Nano, get it revised, get it published, and just keep going.
All right. We're gonna do a TikTok video of you, Christina.
TikTok video.
This one comes from Lois Bushman. Active and passive verbs. She's heard about them, but need them explained again. Do you have a quick and fun explanation?
I do. Actually, I have a whole section about them.
I thought you would.
In the course, because they are a huge part of the page level revision. So active basically means that you have a subject. I don't know if I can describe it like off the cuff, but basically means you have a subject who is acting upon an object. So like the dog ate the homework. I think it's the example I use in the course. Versus passive is when you have the object is kind of being acted upon. So the homework was eaten by the dog. And typically most editors will tell you that passive voice is not as effective. But what I talk about in my course is it's really about choosing the right places to use passive voice to get the most out of it, because it really can be a great stylistic choice for specific reasons. And I actually have a whole list of those reasons, but in the course, but it's about knowing that you're using it and using it intentionally. The same way I say repetitive sentence structure can work if you're using it intentionally. So you want to make sure you're finding those and those instances of passive voice and making sure that you're actively choosing to do passive voice, as opposed to they often slide in without us knowing it. And when we find them and make them active, our sentences and our paragraphs can really just like brighten up, especially if you're writing more of an action scene. Passive voice is one of the first things that will slow down action scenes.
Yeah, good. Yeah, as you were talking, I was thinking of the famous mistakes were made. The construction of that, which is intentional, because the people who say that or said that originally wanted to deflect blame.
Well, exactly. And that's actually something I talk about in the course. One of the reasons to use passive voice is when you don't want to mention who's doing the action. So mistakes were made is a great example. Who's making these mistakes? Well, we haven't said. And so it can be great for mystery, like the book was left on the table. Well, who left the book there? I don't know. Keep reading to find out. But again, intentionally usage is better.
I like that. Let's see. Christina, I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name, but here we go. Asks, is this something nonfiction writers can use?
Narrative nonfiction, absolutely. Memoirs, absolutely. Those types of stories have to follow the same. If you want them to be commercially widely read and successful, they follow all of the same rules and guidelines. And, a quick example, Moneyball, narrative nonfiction, fabulous book, great movie. That's nonfiction, but written. It's got protagonist, it's got entry and exit hooks, it's got, and all of the things right down to the page level revision that we talked about today. Now, if you're writing a math textbook, probably not, but maybe you could write it as a story. I don't know, but, sort of the farther you go into true nonfiction, a self-help book or how to write book or something, it's probably, maybe there's a little bit from it.
Yeah, I call everything a story. So sometimes, but kind of per what you're saying, especially the memoir, and
absolutely
have more storytelling elements in them. Christina, this is a quick question. Christina Carol Pavia asks, if I have a subscription to both Fictionary and Pro Writing Aid, how do I turn on Pro Writing Aid within Fictionary?
Yeah, so all you need to do, depending on if you're using Chrome or Safari, you have to have your extension turned on, and it's different. If you just Google Pro Writing Aid extension Chrome, Pro Writing Aid extension Safari, it'll tell you exactly how to turn it on in each of those browsers. And then you can turn it on and off, because for me, I don't like it on when I'm doing my story level or my scene level revisions, but I do love it on when I'm doing my copy editing, because it finds way more than I ever would.
Yeah, I would echo that. Be careful about turning those kinds of things on when you're drafting or even revising at a higher level, because it can pull you into those line edits without realizing it.
Good point.
It's really distracting. Yeah.
Yeah, it is distracting. I want to do whatever I can to get those squiggly lines to disappear.
No, they're so annoying.
Yeah. Even if it's not the right
that typo.
Even if it's not the right thing, I'm like, just get rid.
Yeah.
Sorry. No, so Kate Ianakis has an interesting question. What is the writer's voice and how do you develop it? And I know that that's like a really big question, but I think in the context of this revision workshop, how does revision contribute to voice?
I mean, absolutely. It's something in the course, I mention it at a couple different levels, because you really can focus on it at different levels. I think it's more of a scene level and page level edit, because the voice typically is not going to change elements of the story. So you're not going to change the catalyst or the midpoint because you have a slightly different way of, the narrator has a slightly different way of speaking, or there's a slightly different voice. However, the way the scenes come about, the way that the scenes unfold, definitely the page level stuff, that is where you start to find voice inconsistencies, where the character will maybe sound one way on one page and different on a different page, and you really want to be fixing those there. So that's, it's a huge topic. But in terms of the revision process, that's where I would focus on it most, is making sure that your voice is coming through and that it is consistent throughout.
It's funny that's the question. So I was talking with a very well-known agent at a big literary house yesterday, and we were talking about author voice, and she was basically saying they have two levels that come in, and they'll either have an author who has just a beautiful voice, but the story's not there, and so they help the author bring the story together, or it's the other way around, where it's a great story, but the voice isn't there yet. And she said it's very rare for a particular debut author to have both. And her comment was, the more, so if the voice is there, then all of these techniques are used to get the story there. If the story is there, then it's practicing writing. And she said exactly what Jessica said was, consistency in a voice. Once you find it, you need to be consistent through the story so that it's all of a sudden not a different voice. And I think as a writer, you come to your own, you just have to write enough that you come to your own voice. It's difficult to say my voice is going to be something because you don't know you are you and you're unique. And so it was a very interesting discussion around how difficult voice is and how do you come about it.
Yeah. And I will also add that, your voice as a writer also differs from the voice of the character. So, you can have a specific voice in one book and a different voice in another book. If you are interested in the Academy, we have a course called Crafting Dynamic Characters taught by an editor agent named Mary Cole. And she has a whole module about voice. And she has this great exercise in there where she helps you kind of figure out voice by playing around with different elements of voice. So like there's different things you can fine tune, and she has you do extremes with them. So you can really see the difference between this element being turned up and this element being turned down. So if it's something you're interested in, check out that Crafting Dynamic Characters course, which comes with your membership to the Academy.
That sounds really great because this is a very persistent, frequent question, and one that I think that every writer wrangles with, perhaps for a lifetime,
Sure.
Yeah.
It's very elusive and very nuanced. So that sounds like a really great exercise. Let's see. I think this goes to the topic of redundancy. Shannon Nesmith asks, any advice on how to vary dialogue tags and make character conversations run smoothly?
Yeah, that's a whole section of the course that I didn't have time to fit in today. But I do have a whole section on dialogue. Really, tags, I'll just say this, with tags, you want them to be invisible. That's kind of the golden rule, is you don't want them to stand out and be like, there's a tag here. And that's, so the way to approach that is you want to make sure it's clear who's speaking, but you want to sort of avoid the same tag repetition, like dialogue, he said, dialogue, she said, dialogue, he said. You can vary sentence structure once again, like with the same tools we talked about today. Maybe the tag goes in the middle of the sentence or the beginning of the sentence, varying different elements, like using action instead of tags, using thought instead of tags, using description instead of tags. And then, sort of one of the last things I want to say, again, just really briefly, please look into it further if you'd like, is making sure that you're not using what we call flashy tags, which are those tags where we think like, oh, we're going to replace all the seds with something even better, like uttered and exclaimed and shouted. And those aren't necessarily flashy ones, but there are some really flashy tags that people try to put in. They like, Thesaurus said, and start putting in all these fancy synonyms for said or asked. And it just ends up making the tag stand out and yell, I'm a tag. So you want to make sure your tags are sort of flying under the radar. Similar to if you think of a movie soundtrack, you don't want anyone to go, there's music. You want it to just be subtly there guiding the scene through, as opposed to drawing attention to itself.
Yeah, there are some, many flashy tags. Usually you just need to use said or no tag if you can. Exactly. That's great.
One thing I'll just mention, if you want to study great dialogue that uses very little tags, is to read any book by Rainbow Rowell. She is like the dialogue master, and it's amazing. She'll go an entire page with no tags and you know exactly who's speaking. It's masterful. That's
an art. It's also confidence.
Yeah.
Two more questions, and I think we'll wrap things up. Christina Rigaud again. She asks, this is a great question, is overfixing a thing?
Yes. I would say, I don't know if you want to take this one, Christina.
That's the problem, right? Is when are you finished? So,
you'll tell us, right?
Yeah, I am. I'm actually going to tell you. When you're editing at the story level or the scene level, and this is partly what Fictionary will help you do, is until you have that set story arc, you're not finished at the story level revision. You're just not. Once you have that all in the right place, okay, declare victory, move on. And then once you've gone through the story elements in each scene and you're happy with them, okay, move on. The hardest part of not knowing when you're done is at the page level, because you can fuss and overdo it. And all of a sudden the sentence is worse, but you can't see it anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there, I'm just going to now turn that over to Jessica and go, what's your advice on that part?
Well, I mean, I echo that. I call it revision fatigue. And what happens is you revise things over and over where it starts to lose its sparkle. And I've seen it happen many times. I can usually tell when I read someone's manuscript when it's been over revised, and you sort of lose the thing that kind of made it special from the beginning. So it's very important to, trust your instincts, get feedback before you start ripping things apart again. But the reason I was very aware of this, and I structured the revision course specifically with checkpoints. So every revision level has a series of set checkpoints so that when you can check every box, you are done with that revision level. And yes, it requires a little bit of honesty and analysis on your part, but I really wanted it to be the kind of course where you could use it as a checklist so that okay, I've done all of this. I've taken it as far as I can take it. Now I either need to get another editor on board, or I need to send it to an agent, or I need to get feedback. But that was really important to me because I have revised novels to death, and often there's a point of diminishing returns for sure.
I love how you each, even though, as you put it, intuition is part of it, honesty is part of it, but you've also supplied a system to help make that decision. So that's really great. We have one more question. I think this is a great question, great finale question for both this segment and maybe the whole series. It comes from fantasy writer BJ. What happens after the page level revision? Do you start querying and publish then?
That's an excellent question. It really depends on your goals, in my opinion. One thing, and I think this is part of the free preview of our courses. So if you sign up for the free preview, you'll see we have a lecture at the start of the course that takes you through the whole process. And it says what you do between each level, what you do at the end. And there's different things you can do. So after the page level, you can have beta readers read it. You can look for a copy editor if you think it's ready to move on. If you're self-publishing, I definitely recommend you hire your own copy editor. If you are wanting to traditionally publish, that is definitely the time where you could start querying agents. And then what will happen with the querying process is you'll start to, and we actually have a whole course on querying as well. So you have that course in there as well if you want to get into the academy. But what happens is you'll start to get feedback from agents too. So they'll start to say, I don't think this character's developed very well, or I think that the story slows in the middle, or whatever the process is. Now you have some really concrete feedback. You can go back to the revision course, find that checkpoint of pacing, find that checkpoint of character transformation, exactly what the agent just gave you. And now you can start, fine tuning again with a little bit more guidance. So again, I built the course so that you could take it multiple times depending on what you want to focus on. But I would say absolutely you can start querying after a page level.
I have one other suggestion that I love to give is, if you're ready to query agents, you're probably also ready to submit to writing awards and competitions. And two webinars back, we talked about Lisa Stringfellow, who wrote her novel in NaNoWriMo. She edited in a Fictionary, and she won a literary award, and that's how she got her agent. And she got an amazing agent, and then got her 2-book deal with HarperCollins, right? But lots of the Fictionary authors are doing that, and they're getting 1, 2, 3 awards. And it does a couple of things for you. One, it helps to get you in the door if you do want to go traditionally published, or usually you also get some digital badge or marking logo that you can put on your book cover. So if you're self-publishing, then you have that, and you always put it up in your Amazon text of won this literary award, and it gives you that leg up when people are searching for what's the latest mystery out. Oh, this one won an award, or was shortlisted for award, or was longlisted for an award. It doesn't matter, you're on that list, right? That it's a really interesting way to rise above and get your book noticed. So I'm a huge fan. I just caution that make sure you research the contest, that it's a real one.
Good advice.
Yeah, well, some ask for money, and you want to make sure that it's it's a legitimate competition, that it's like anything else in the world. Just do your research that it's a valid competition.
Yeah. Well, this has been such a joy. I'm going to miss our revision workshop series, but I advise anybody, especially if you've gone through this too, you guys both recommended kind of going back at certain points and checking things. And so these links are going to be alive for at least 100 years. As long as they choose to be live. And so you can go back and watch the series again, maybe with each novel. You know, it's good. I am constantly, I'm a craft book junkie, and I love that includes revision books and revision resources and classes. So I want to thank you both again for doing this for the NaNoWriMo writers. It was a real treat.
Well, thank you for having us. I've looked forward to each one, and I've loved working with Christina, obviously. And so, it's a delight.
It's been fabulous. And thank you, Grant. We really appreciate you bringing us out to the NaNoWriMo team.
Thank you so much. You guys were so generous and so wise. And everybody out there in NaNoWriMo land, good luck revising your